Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius, the official energy drink of pewterreport.com. Happy Monday to everybody as we start off a new week of Pewter Report podcast, and we got a good one in store to kick off the week because we're going to talk more about Josh Grizzard taking over as the offensive coordinator. We're going to talk about a little sweepstakes for an edge rusher that the Bucs may be interested in. Talk about another edge rusher as well. And there was just a new hiring by the Bucs that just happened about half an hour ago that we will talk about as well. And of course, get to questions and comments and get to roll call as well because it is Monday. So an action-packed show for you. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joined with me is the face that runs the place at pewterreport.com, SR, Scott Reynolds. Scott, how are we doing?
Doing good. It's been an action-packed offseason so far, right? We've got the new offensive coordinator hire that came down on Friday afternoon. We had a ton of people join us for the Pewter Report emergency podcast. 11,000 people watched that as Josh Grizzard was named the new offensive coordinator and play caller for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And that's something that if you are a Pewter Report reader and viewer, probably not a surprise. We've been talking about it for a couple weeks. Even before Liam Cohen got the Jacksonville job, I did an SR Spat 5 saying, hey, he's probably the guy, certainly the top in-house candidate. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened after interviewing a bunch of people. Not as many as they did in the past, not 12 like they did in 2023 or 10 last year. They interviewed 6, but that was enough. 5 other guys to compare to Josh Grizzard. And they did what we kind of expected. They went with the familiar face, the proven commodity in terms of what he's already done for the offense with that third down conversion percentage being the best in the NFL at around 51%. And he was the pass game coordinator last year under Liam Cohen. So that certainly was a big factor, keeping the continuity going on this offense with him and that relationship with Baker Mayfield. We heard from Mayfield and other Buccaneers over the weekend saying they're pretty ecstatic about this, Matt. This seems like a hire that was not terribly surprising, but also well received amongst the Bucs players, especially the offensive guys.
Yeah, I spoke to some Bucs brass as well that said that the players love Josh Grizzard, and that obviously factored into him getting the job. And I think what's important for everybody to keep in mind or understand as well, or at least what I like about how this whole process went about and how it ended up with Josh Grizzard, is that, yes, they were keeping an open mind and casting a wider net, but it was not as big of a search as it was last year because I think the Bucs had a better plan in mind based off of what the results were with Liam Cohen the season before. They knew what style of offense they wanted. They knew what type of terminology and continuity that they wanted with the offense. And I think that's why you saw so many Rams coaching personnel, interview for this job, along with Josh Grizzard, who just learned under Liam Cohen and comes from the Mike McDaniel system, which, is not very far off from Sean McVay as well, because they were coaches together at a time back in the day. And that's not to say that the Bucs didn't have a plan a year ago before they hired Liam Cohen. I just think that there wasn't as vast of a coaching tree when Dave Canales left from Seattle that there was with Liam Cohen coming from Sean McVay and everything like that. And once you saw the results with what Tampa Bay did last season, 3rd in overall offense, 3rd in passing yards, with Josh Grizzard played a role in being the passing game coordinator, and 4th in points, you're like, okay, we don't want to go that far off from that. We're pretty damn good at scoring points and moving the football. So how do we harness that? How do we keep that? It's all the interviews that we saw and ultimately ended on Josh Grizzard. So I love this move. It was good to see a lot of Bucs fans seem to be very happy about it too. Of course, some people disagree, but overall, with the exception of the inexperience of play calling for Josh Grizzard, I'm not sure what the issue is because he seems to really check off a lot of boxes for this team.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you mentioned there's a lot of Rams-centric people that were in the interview process from Nate Scheelhaus, who was really just with the Rams this past year as as one of their offensive assistants, and he had 1 year's worth of play calling experience at Iowa State. Doug Ragone was the Falcons offensive coordinator for 3 years under Arthur Smith, but Smith called plays. So he wasn't really a play caller. Grant Udinski wasn't, neither was Nick Caley. So you had a lot of guys that were in this interview process, including Josh Grizzard, that didn't have any play calling experience or very little play calling experience. So again, Todd Bowles not really afraid of bringing on a guy with little to no play calling experience. That's kind of been the case the last 2 years. Certainly was the case with Dave Canales back in 2023. And I feel pretty good about this situation, Matt and Pewter people, because Bowles is going to more than likely have call-it periods in OTAs and training camp to really kind of give Grizzard that kind of hands-on experience of not knowing what's coming and then having to make some calls and adjust to things on the fly. And that certainly seemed to serve Dave Canales well. They didn't have to do it with Liam Cohen because Cohen had a couple of years worth of play calling experience at Kentucky. But the fact that this is not the first rodeo for Todd Bowles in this situation, I feel pretty good about this. He and Jason Light have been through the interview process for 3 years now, trying to find offensive coordinators, and they've done a good job the last two. You have to kind of give them the benefit of the doubt with this one, certainly because of the continuity that they've been able to establish on offense with the Grizzard hire. And again, going back to Canales, Todd Bowles broke him in as a first-time play caller with those call-up periods. I would imagine we're going to see that again, and that seemed to be successful. I have no reason to believe it's not going to be this time around.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Scott, about that. Todd Bowles is familiar with breaking in a new coach or kind of how to bring a new coach along in a higher role as an offensive coordinator and a play caller. And we talked about this last week a little bit too, maybe not necessarily the call-it periods going one-on-one against Todd Bowles, but the expectations and what we should see from this group, because we can't go in last weekend of July, early August, and just expect this offense to pick up right where it left off. And even early in the season, I'd say the first couple of weeks, maybe the first month of the season, we can't go in and expect them just to be like, oh, well, the Bucs scored 29.5 points per game, so they better be scoring 31 by the time you reach October. That's just not realistic, and that's not going to happen. Maybe it will, but I wouldn't bet on that happening right away. It doesn't mean that they can't get to scoring 30 points per game. But at the same time, you don't want it to really dip below, let's just say, when it was at its worst with Dave Canales in his first year. And even their worst wasn't terrible and awful. What I'm saying is when it comes to either the call-up periods, calling live plays in the preseason, it's got to reach a certain level, but don't expect it to be the ultimate pillar of what this offense is going to be and what you can expect. So Todd Bowles, as we know, is very steady Eddie with his players. I would imagine it's a similar type of scenario when it comes to the coaches as well. So that doesn't mean he's going to be completely treated with kid gloves, Josh Grizzard I'm talking about, but there will be a little bit of some growing pains, of some situations where you're really trying to figure it out, and that's okay, because the defense should be better this season, so the defense should be able to bail out the offense a little bit. And with all that said, I think Mike Evans really summed it up perfectly, where he was like, listen, I don't care who the offensive coordinator is. It's my job to get open. It's my job to get the football. You still have Baker, Mike, hopefully Chris Godwin, a top 5 offensive line, and Bucky Irving. This team will be fine if you took the top high school coach in the league and made him a play caller. This offense would still probably be able to put up 20 points per game. So
I agree.
I wouldn't worry too much about the inexperience of Josh Grizzard.
That's right. And the Buccaneers hired a new pass game coordinator today. As Wasp says, what about and it's pronounced Kefense Hynson hire. Kefense Hynson is the new pass game coordinator for the Buccaneers. He replaces Josh Grizzard, who was the pass game coordinator in Tampa Bay when he got that promotion. So interestingly enough, you did the story on Hynson, Matt, and Kefense is an interesting guy because he was actually Josh Grizzard's receivers coach back at Yale and was the co-offensive coordinator back in the day. So that's the connection between those two. But Hynson has spent the last couple of years working at Oregon State as their wide receivers coach and their pass game coordinator, and was even their interim head coach for their bowl game back in 2023 as their head coach left to go become the head coach at Michigan State. There you see him with Marcus Freeman from Notre Dame. So this is an interesting hire. I believe he's 45 years old, so
Yes.
still relatively a younger type of coach that comes in, brings a lot of experience to the table, and it certainly has that familiarity with Josh Grizzard. And I was wondering if they were actually going to replace Grizzard, or I should say that role that Grizzard had as the pass game coordinator. We have our answer now, and that is Kefense Hynson, who is the new pass game coordinator in Tampa.
Yeah, very cool hiring. And at first I was wondering, like, what is the connection? Where is it? And as you mentioned, he was with Yale from 2009 to 2011 as the co-offensive coordinator and the wide receivers coach, while Josh Grizzard was still playing at Yale as a defensive back. So if you're a wide receivers coach, who are you dealing with most on the defensive side? The defensive back. So he probably saw a lot of Josh Grizzard. And then they just missed each other as well, because Grizzard stayed with Yale to be a student assistant coach once he graduated and was there in 2012. Hynson had moved on to Montana, and he's had a number of stops all in college. So he played college football at Willamette. That's a Division III school over in Salem, Oregon. Was also at Quincy University, had stops at Boise State, Minnesota State, Western Washington, Yale, Montana, Norfolk State, and Hawaii. This is all before he got to Oregon State. He coached wide receivers at one point, running backs at one point, tight ends at one point, has been a co-offensive coordinator, and has been a passing game coordinator as well. So he's done a little bit of everything at the collegiate level. So it's cool to see him now get an opportunity at the NFL level in a passing game coordinator role, which sure, it'll be different in the NFL, but a role that he's familiar with in college. And also Oregon had a rough year this season, was 5-7. Still ended up being 30th in passing yards per game out of all of college football. And you know how wacky college football can be with lopsided scores and lopsided games and things like that. So 30th overall for a team that didn't have the best win-loss record, I still think is pretty good. So it'll be interesting what he brings to the room. You're certainly going to get a motivated guy. I mean, you always want your coaches to be motivated, but you're going to have a first-time play caller in Josh Grizzard and a first-time coach at the NFL level with Kefense Hynson. So excited to see what this new addition will bring to the team and what he can do in the passing game for the Bucs. I mean, we know Baker Mayfield has worked with a number of different coaches, so why not add one more into the mix?
Yeah, and as you said, too, even though Grizzard was a safety playing for Yale, like you said, I mean, he obviously rubbed off on him in terms of making an impression and certainly covering all those defensive backs, or I should say covering all the receivers with the Yale defensive backs. He got a look at Hynson's handiwork on a regular basis in practice. So very cool hire there to see. I think that rounds out the offensive staff now. Jacksonville's not getting any of these offensive coaches. And it was confirmed over the weekend. Rick Stroud confirmed with Larry Foote, who was at the Pro Bowl, that Foote will be returning as the linebackers coach, the inside linebackers coach, and probably as a coordinator. I think that's, it's a role that he shared with Casey Rogers. It remains to be seen if he will be the
full-time
sole
defensive coordinator,
right? Or if he is going to be sharing that role with a new defensive line coach, or maybe someone else on the staff. We'll have to see how that pans out. But at least Todd Bowles gets to keep one of his veteran coaches after losing Casey Rogers, Matt.
Yeah, I think it's good for stability overall. I know the linebackers didn't have the best year and the defense didn't have the best year, but I think it helps this offseason going into free agency and specifically the draft as well, where you're collaborating with the coach. Like, we know what type of cornerbacks that Todd Bowles likes. He likes the tall, lanky type of corners, obviously with speed, with guys like Jamel Dean and Zion McCollum. But it will help in the search for inside linebacker because, as we all know, the Bucs are going to be looking for that position a lot during this offseason. It's good to see not only just what type of style of inside linebacker that Larry Foote would like to have, and obviously what Todd Bowles would like to have as well, but Larry Foote can look at it and say, okay, this guy fits in our defense because of X, Y, and Z. And this guy doesn't fit in our defense because of X, Y, and Z, or whatever the case may be. Yeah. And I think that's a little bit easier to do with someone that's been here for as long as Larry Foote has, going back to 2019. So we're talking about 6 years now. I think it's a little bit easier to do with someone that you've collaborated with for quite a long time now versus having a new coach just come in, only be with the team for a month or two, really before everything gets rocking and rolling. Sure, you can argue, oh, well, then you got a fresh set of eyes, maybe seeing something different. And there's absolutely truth to that. But as far as this team just went through a long search with finding an offensive coordinator, they're going to go through another search now with the defensive line coach. I don't know how much more it would have taken out of them to find an inside linebackers coach as well. So cool to see Larry Foote back with the Bucs after interviewing with the Lions. It was nice to see him at the Pro Bowl as well. He was an assistant coach. Thad Lewis, the quarterback's coach, was an assistant coach for it as well as the NFC won. Baker Mayfield had a pretty good day, 135 yards, 3 touchdowns. Mike Evans had a cool moment where he got a lateral from George Kittle. Tristan Wirfs and his team won their relay race event where him and Frank Ragnow flipped the tire. And Vita Vea won his tug-of-war event with some other NFC players. So, the announcers were hyping up Vita Vea more than anyone else. So, I know not everyone loves the Pro Bowl anymore. I totally understand why. But a good turnout for all the Bucs players involved. So, that was good to see.
It was good to see. I refuse to watch the Pro Bowl because it's no longer what it used to be when I used to watch it. I'm glad they call it the Pro Bowl games now. They should just call it something different. They just call it like the NFL games or something. Just leave the Pro Bowl out because it's not the Pro Bowl anymore. It's like flag football and skills competitions and stuff. It is what it is. We do this little thing at 4:20 on Mondays. We didn't do it last Monday. We apologize. We were working hard at the Senior Bowl. And we were racing to get that Senior Bowl episode produced because we just got into town and had to get everything set up and all that. So we weren't quite prepared for this wonderful thing that we do every Monday at 4:20. Gosh, Matt, I'm having a hard time remembering because we haven't done one in like a couple weeks. But what's it called again?
I got you, Scott. It's called Roll Call. And yes, we love doing this as much as we can on Monday shows at 4:20. We're actually on time for once. Usually we're fashionably late. We do this every Monday show at 4:20. We love interacting with our Pewter people and our fans as much as we can. And we have awesome fans all over the globe that we want to give everybody a shout out. So what we do during Roll Call is one of us goes on a conversation about the Bucs. And in the meantime, if you want to put in the chat where you are watching from, we will put it up on the screen and give some personal shout outs as well as we get it started, like Christopher Oxentine watching from Overland Park. So, Scott, you said you're going to go on a little rant today. So whenever you're ready, we'll get it rocking and rolling.
I will do that. I'm going to drop a couple of videos in the chat here. The first one is from our own Josh Capo. It just came out on Pewter Report TV, our YouTube channel, which I think most of you are probably watching on. If not, you might be watching it on our X or Facebook live stream, and that's fine. We appreciate you tuning in from anywhere and everywhere you can. But we've got a couple of pass rushers to talk about. We talked about Mike Green a lot last week at the Senior Bowl. And there's a couple of veteran guys, not draft guys, but veteran guys that the Buccaneers might go after. You might have heard of one of these guys. Myles Garrett? Yeah, Myles Garrett. The Cleveland Browns have said, we're not trading Myles Garrett. We're going to keep him because he's a cornerstone piece of the Cleveland franchise. Okay, fine. Myles Garrett came out today and said, I want out. Get me out of here. Come on. What are you doing with your 3 wins? I need to win a Super Bowl. Come on. So he wants out of Cleveland. And there's going to be a lot of interested people in him because he's really, really good. 6-time Pro Bowler. Just an absolute pass rushing demon, just can get to the quarterback multiple ways. Extremely talented player. And he might have, a guy around Tampa Bay that kind of knows about him a little bit, that played with them. Oh, that's right, Baker Mayfield. Yeah, you don't think he's knocking on Todd Bowles and Jay Slide's door saying, hey, let's go get Myles Garrett. I played with this guy. He's pretty good. Matter of fact, he sacked me when I was in Carolina. He's so good. But in all seriousness, this would be, we talked about this team needing to really ramp up for a Super Bowl run here in 2025. The Super Bowl window is open. Maybe you have Levante David coming back. You still have Mike Evans. You got a lot of these guys in their prime, a lot of younger players like the Kate Ottens and the Yaya Diabis and the Kalijah Kansis. They've leveled up. It seems like it's go time now for the Buccaneers. And Myles Garrett would be a guy that could help Tampa Bay get to a Super Bowl. Remember, Jason Light made two key moves, a trade for Jason Pierre-Paul in 2018 that helped this team get closer to the Super Bowl, then acquiring via free agency Shaq Barrett, kind of an unknown commodity who exploded on the scene for 19 and a half sacks as a free agent in 2019. Those two guys were instrumental in helping the Buccaneers get to and win Super Bowl 55 in 2020. Of course, Tom Brady had something to do with that too. But from a defensive standpoint, those guys really were key. The problem is, as Josh Capo points out, and there's a lot to the video, I'm not really spoiling it for you, but it's probably going to cost 2 first-rounders for Tampa Bay, especially where they're drafting to get Myles Garrett. Now, I didn't know that Myles Garrett was going to come out and say, hey, I want to be traded on Monday when I was doing my Pewter Pulse video on Saturday. But I suggested Trey Hendrickson, a guy that is a 4-time Pro Bowler, since leaving the New Orleans Saints, where he had 13 and a half sacks, his final season with the Saints, where he was drafted as a 3rd-round pick out of Florida Atlantic. He is an Apopka native. If Apopka sounds familiar, it's in the middle of the state of Florida. It's where Warren Sapp went to high school, the Blue Darters. He is an Orlando native. So maybe he wants a change of scenery coming from Cincinnati, where they're not going to have the money to re-sign him. The Bengals have pretty much already come out and said that. They need the money. They need his cap space for a big, huge, massive contract extension for Jamar Chase, their big-time wide receiver. And that's understandable. Trey Hendrickson's 30 years old, but he's coming off of back-to-back seasons with 17 and a half sacks. That's not combined. That's in each of the last 2 years. He's had 17 and a half sacks on a kind of a bad Bengals defense. Hendrickson, because of his age and because he's not Myles Garrett, would probably only cost, a 2nd-round pick. So to me, that this is something the Buccaneers could and should consider. If it's only going to cost a 2nd round to get Hendrickson, for example, versus a guy like Myles Garrett, who's 1 year younger, but also really, really good, costs 2 first-round picks. I don't know. I know Jason Light is not afraid of making some splash moves, but 2 first-rounders for Myles Garrett, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up making a trade. It's closer to that Jason Pierre-Paul give up a 3rd-round pick for an edge rusher, and that's what happened in 2018.
Yeah, so Adam Schefter had a really good tweet to kind of put it in perspective as well, because he said a potential trade comp, and this goes back to when Khalil Mack got traded from the Raiders to the Chicago Bears a couple of seasons ago. The Bears gave up 2 first-round picks, a 3rd-round pick, and a 6th round for Mack, and then it also said a 2nd-round pick and a conditional 5th-round pick. So, again, this was a couple of years ago, and it seems like forever ago when Khalil Mack was on the Bears, and the Bears had like this vaunted defense, but they gave out a ton of picks just for Khalil Mack back then. And I don't recall exactly what the market was like, but it was not as out in the open the way that it is for Myles Garrett. So if Khalil Mack, who was 27 at the time, still costs 2 first-round picks, a 3rd-round pick, and a 6th-round pick, what is Myles Garrett going to cost when all these teams are going to be in on it, right? Like that's part of the problem is everyone's like, oh, just go get him. Just go get him. Well, the Bucs aren't the only team that's going after Myles Garrett, which is why I think Trey Hendrickson is genius, because it's almost like you're doing the bait and switch. Like the Bucs wanted Trey Hendrickson all along, and now everybody has their attention on Myles Garrett, that you can kind of swoop in and maybe get Hendrickson when everybody is focused on Myles Garrett. There's no doubt. There's no question. He's a generational talent. But if the beginning asking price is 2 first-round picks, that's only going to go up the more that the Packers get involved or the Bears get involved or all these other teams. I mean, we see it all the time when it comes to trading for the number 1 overall pick in the draft. And that's for a player that is an unproven commodity, as we've seen time and time again. Look at the Panthers with Bryce Young, and I know he played much better down the stretch. But, certainly at the time, there was a little bit of buyer's remorse.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about a guy who's the best edge rusher in the NFL and does it on a really bad football team and still gets production. I'm all for the Bucs going after Myles Garrett.
I
2
am too.
first-round picks? Yeah, sure, I'm in. 4 first-round picks? That's a little bit too rich. So, again, it's going to come down to who is legitimately a contender. And what sucks and what hurts the Bucs is I was looking it up. Myles Garrett doesn't have a no-trade clause. If he had a no-trade clause, this would help a lot. And I know the Browns are steadfast on they still don't want to trade him.
Right.
I would argue this is very different than when Devin White requested a trade, and the Bucs were just like, nah, we're not going to do that. A little bit different here with Myles Garrett. But if Myles Garrett had a no-trade clause, that would help a lot with his statement where he said, I want to go win a Super Bowl.
Right.
Because, some people are saying the Bears might be interested. Okay, but are the Bears, really a Super Bowl contender at this point? No, I don't necessarily think so, even though they have a lot of potential. If he had a no-trade clause, he could say, hey, I only want to go to Tampa. How do we get it done? Maybe he wouldn't just pick Tampa, but it'd be one of maybe 3 or 4 teams instead of one of 7 or 8 teams. So it's intriguing. Obviously, the Bucs are going to at least look into it, see what the price is going to be. But I'm not going to get my heart broken if they don't get Myles Garrett, if they're able to go after Trey Hendrickson or sign Khalil Mack or whatever the case may be. That's the golden goose. There's no doubt about it. I'm just saying, don't get your heart broken, Bucs fans, if it's not the case with Myles Garrett.
Yeah, and you have to wonder too, the Atlanta Falcons, are they interested? And just to kind of throw that out there, for example, let's say the Falcons, right? I know they traded for Matthew Judon last year, but he's going to be a free agent. So you've got the Falcons, right, that have the 15th overall pick in the draft. And see, this is kind of what you're talking about too, is if it's 2 first-round picks and the Bucs and the Falcons make the same offer, I don't know how much say-so Myles Garrett's going to have in saying, no, I'm not going to go there, whatever. Maybe he does have a lot of say. But if you are the Browns, you'd rather have the 15th pick than the 19th pick, right? So then it might cost you more if you're the Buccaneers than 2 first-round picks. If Atlanta's saying, we're offering 2, and then the Browns come to Tampa Bay and say, hey, I got Atlanta at 15, and they're offering 2 first-round picks, and you're at 19. So if you want this deal done, you're going to have to throw something else in. We'd like a third in 2026 or something. Now the price just becomes a little crazy expensive, right? And at the same time, too, it's not that he's an older player. I mean, he's a veteran player still in his prime. He's 29, just turned 29. He'll be 29, or he'll be 30, I should say, on December 29th. So he's got a full year before he turns 30, just about. Yeah. So you probably can pencil him in for 4 years, right? But at the same time, 2 first-round picks, and we've seen what the Buccaneers have been able to do with their first-round picks. Guys like Vita Vea, guys like Elijah Cansey, Tristan Wirfs, Graham Barton. We're talking about longevity here. We're talking about players that will and could and should play for 10 years or more. I mean, look at Mike Evans, was a former first-rounder. So, if it's me, I want to get an alpha elite pass rusher for as little as I can. And if I had both deals on the table with the Bengals accepting a number 2 and the Browns accepting 2 first-round picks from Tampa Bay, I'm pulling the trigger on Trey Hendrickson. He's a speed guy. I think he'd be a compliment to Yaya Diaby on the other side. He's kind of like that Shaq Barrett type that they're really missing, that guy that's capable of getting double-digit sacks. But listen, if Jason wants to make that trade of Myles Garrett, I am not going to shoot that down. If the team feels that he's worth it, by all means, go all in.
What's the furthest you would go for Myles Garrett in terms of how many draft picks?
I mean, I think to me it's 2 first-rounders. I think that's the most I'd really want to go. Because again, too, it's you're talking about one player, and if you're giving up 3 draft picks for one player, that's 3 potential players / starters that you could find, and younger guys too, to help your team, not just in 2025, but in the long run. This is a short-term, one contract kind of deal where he's got 2 years left in his deal. You probably, extend it, and he's going to want more money. He's going to want to raise. And now you're looking at $40 million plus. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of draft compensation, and you better get a Super Bowl out of it, because otherwise it's going to sting a little bit. Again, if this team was hit and miss with their draft picks, I'd say, sure, go get the surefire thing. Now, Jason Light has been hit and miss when it comes to drafting edge rushers, right? Noah Spence, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. Yaya Diaby's been the best one yet. 4.5 sacks last year, third-round pick. Chris Braswell, rookie season, 1.5 sacks as a second-rounder. Those are the 4 premier edge rushers that he's drafted. Really has not been that huge hit outside of Diaby having a ceiling. So I'm all in favor of going to get a veteran, Matt, because I'm not saying Jason Light can't draft an edge rusher. He just hasn't yet. It's not like offensive linemen where he hits. It's not like even defensive tackles where he hits. The edge rushers just hasn't hit yet. So I'm all in favor of getting a veteran guy, but you can't give away tons of draft capital just to get one guy, because if he gets hurt, that's another issue too.
Yeah, that is a risk. I mean, if we're in agreement though that the Super Bowl window is open now for the Buccaneers, I mean, we're talking about the best pass rusher in the league. If there was a way to spread the picks out over 3 years,
yeah,
I think I'd be comfortable going 2 firsts and then a second, or maybe even 2 firsts, a second, and then maybe a third. Again, if you're spreading it out over 3 years. So yeah, you're losing draft picks, but not like 3 in one season if you're able to spread it out a little bit more. The beauty, though, is, as you just kind of pointed out, it's not just like it's Myles Garrett or bust. There is Trey Hendrickson. There is Josh Sweat, who's going to be available.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of other edge rushers that can help make this team better.
And there's a lot in the draft. They get hit on the right one. That's the thing.
Yeah. Well, that's what concerns me is I am a little worried that the Bucs are just going to go, you know what? One of these draft picks have to hit, and we're going to find an edge rusher that way. And then you're kind of just sitting around waiting for either Chris Braswell to put it together, or Yaya has a breakout, like a true breakout year with double-digit sacks, or this new pick who you have to take in either the first or second round to truly believe that they can be a game changer. I just worry that the Bucs are going to sit on the sidelines and wait a little bit too much for the development. And by all means, like, they should believe in developing their own players. They've done it time and time again. But if you truly believe the Super Bowl window is now, I don't know if you can kind of look at that one position specifically, which I think many of us agree is a top 3 most important position in the NFL. You can't go into the next season with that as a weakness if you truly think you can contend with the Eagles and the Lions and all these other teams to reach the Super Bowl.
The other thing too is George Edwards. I've been an outspoken critic of his. I just don't think he's a good pass rush coach. He's been a linebackers coach. He's been a defensive coordinator in the league. It's not like he doesn't know necessarily how to conduct the drills and all of that, but the results have been very lackluster. 12 combined sacks from all of the outside linebackers in the roster. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka's sack total went down. Yaya Diaby's sack total went down. Marquise Watts was out there, about the same amount of plays, didn't get a sack this year. There's been some regression there. And I don't have the faith in him to, even if you draft a Mike Green in the first round or Donovan Ezeraku in the second round, I don't necessarily have the faith that he's going to be the guy to develop them, and get them to be the pass rushers that Todd Bowles really needs them to be. So, I've beaten that drum a lot. Not going to stop now, but at the same time, I don't decide who's on this staff. But if I'm Jason Light, I'm maybe thinking twice about drafting a premier edge rusher in the first round. If he's not going to get developed, maybe Jason has a different opinion of George Edwards than I do. I don't know, but I just haven't seen the results. And for Chris Braswell to not be getting way more playing time at the end of the year than he did, and he was playing pretty well. He actually deserved to be on the field more. The fact that he wasn't, to me, was criminal. I just don't think that this guy knows how to. He believed in Joe Tryon-Shoyinka for way too long, thought he was this great athletic pass rusher, and he absolutely is not. And so I don't know. Go out and get a guy that knows how to do it already, because that's probably the best bet.
I mean, the main goal is getting wins. And that's obviously the first objective. But you also got to find a way to develop your guys, maybe get some playing time. And the Bucs were winning a lot of games down the stretch and winning handsomely by a lot. You know, there weren't many tight games at the end except for the Cowboys game that they lost, and then obviously the Saints game to punch their ticket into the postseason. There were plenty of times where Chris Braswell could have got way more quote-unquote garbage time snaps than he did. Even in blowouts, he was getting 5% of the snaps on defense. And
it didn't make sense.
That's just not enough. And again, he was a second-round pick. All right? This isn't a sixth-round pick where you're like, hey, I can't believe he made the roster. Good for him. But, like, he's a second-round pick. He's supposed to be a big-time contributor on this team. You know who was a second-round pick in 2020? Antoine Winfield Jr. Is he important to the team? You're damn right he is.
I'm with you, brother. I'm with you. I'm also with Celsius. And, folks, listen. Guess what I had over the weekend? More playa vibes. Playa. My wife, Ashley, says playa. I say playa. I'm with you, Matt. I think it means beach. It's pina colada flavored. Yeah. It's empty because I already drank mine. It's really good. Oh, and by the way, there's a new Celsius flavor. Get this. Retro vibe. That's right. Retro vibe. If you're a kid from the 70s and 80s like me, what did you grow up eating? Not just ice cream, not just like, the bomb pops and stuff you get from the Good Humor Man and the little van down the street. You ate sherbet. This is a sparkling sherbet flavor, right? So it's the raspberry, orange, lime sherbet all rolled into one. It tastes like sherbet too. I don't know how they do it at Celsius. It's crazy. But 2 new flavors, the retro vibe and the playa vibe, available now. I got these at Nutrition Smart. Not my
love it.
Bodega.
Yeah, they're always coming out with new flavors. Love Celsius for that. I love the Arctic vibe. Great way to start your day. Get you ready for a workout as well. So if you need to know where to find a Celsius energy drink, go to the Celsius store locator on their website. Punch in your address. It'll tell you the closest place where you can pick one up. Could be a Walmart, a Publix, a Stop and Shop, or, as Scott just mentioned, your Bodega.
Bodega.
And after you try Celsius and you know you love it and you want more, you can purchase it in bulk over on Amazon with the Subscribe and Save. I'd recommend that variety pack because there's so many fantastic flavors. Have it sent to your place of residence whenever you want. It's completely at your leisure. Just make sure you're drinking Celsius energy drinks, the official energy drink of pewterreport.com. Another thing we appreciate, Scott. Roll call. Yes. Right. Roll call. Great turnout today. Thank you to everybody for participating. We appreciate when everybody's able to stop by. So let's give a couple of specific shout outs from today. Felix Schmidt, who says Edmonton, Canada, negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit here today. Damn. Wish I lived in Tampa.
It's cold. Ugh.
That's got to be tough. And it's the wind chill that's like the worst part of being cold. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, Kells 808 says aloha from Hawaii. Gustavo Espinoza, who's also a Pewter Report YouTube channel member, thank you for your support, is watching from Jersey. Shout out. A Purple, Fort Myers, Vert Donk, Bowling Green, Ohio, LFG. Shout out to Scotty Miller as well, a Bucs champion. Played at Bowling Green. JB CDs from Jamaica, Queens, watching that. Shout out, Queens. EN, Honolulu, Hawaii. So we have 2 Hawaiians watching the show today.
Nice.
Really like that. Yeah, mahalo. Malcolm Harvey says Myles Garrett, Florida. I mean Jacksonville, Florida has Myles Garrett on the mind. Hal from Columbia, South America. Very cool to see. A little international. And last but certainly not least, probably the most beloved city by Bucs fans outside of the Tampa Bay area, Jason Wadier watching from Galveston, Texas, Mike Evans and Zion's hometown. So
that's awesome.
Great turnout once again for roll call.
And we also would like to take some time to thank our Pewter Platinum members, Scott Federico, Rathel Gordon, Noah Parr, Scotty J, Dave Anderson, Eric McMillan, Zach Jarvis, Hezo813, Ash Fishpool, Joel L. Rican, Sam, John Dale Morris, and Zap Brannigan. And also a big thank you to our new Pewter Report TV channel members who have recently joined, rejoined, or leveled up. Space Windu, Zap Brannigan, Derek Danger, love that name, Matt, Jason Wadier, Bill Vincent, Scott Sharkey, and Stuck with Green. Greatly appreciate you're coming aboard again or for the first time. It's always appreciated. And one last mention here. This is our Pewter Premier channel members. Remember, if you're a Pewter Premier or Pewter Platinum member, you get all of the perks, plus you get the Pewter Insider video access, which Matt and I do on Fridays at 1:30.
Right.
And we pretty much told you it was going to be Josh Grizzard for the offensive coordinator hire. We even told you it's probably going to come down like literally after the podcast or during the podcast, and it did. It came like an hour later. So it's a great place to get some inside scoop. We do it later in the week during football season. That's great because we have those shows. It's the latest thing that we do with the latest information prior to kickoff, really before Pewter pregame. So it's a great opportunity for you guys to get that extra bonus podcast only for our Pewter Platinum and Premier members. So greatly thank you for your support there. We're going to do a couple super chats here in 1 second, but I would be remiss if I didn't tell you how to support our efforts here at Pewter Report, and that's by becoming a Pewter Report TV channel member. We've seen a surge in our subscribers. We're up to 17,400 right now, which is crazy growth. Thank you very much. But we have also seen a huge surge in our Pewter Report TV channel members, and you can use those cool custom emojis and loyalty badges. I added some more emojis over the last week. For $3.99, you can be a Pewter People member. The Pewter Pro members get early access to our videos. So whenever we came out with a video like Josh just did for the Myles Garrett video he did, you get a 30 to 60 minute preview of that before everybody else does publicly. $6.99 a month. Pewter Premier and Platinum members, $9.99 a month and $24.99 a month. And we are narrowing down the date. It'll be later this month in February, right before we go to the Combine for our Pewter Platinum meetup. We'll have that date for you hopefully later this week. And we're trying to round up a couple of Buccaneer personnel that can join us there too. So if you're a Pewter Platinum member, we have a great little get-together planned later this month in Tampa. We'll let you know the date as soon as possible. We'd love to see you guys join us for that event.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you to everybody for your support of pewterreport.com. Let's get to these super chats, starting off with Revfish. Thanks for the $4.99. Question: do y'all see good tackling ever returning to Tampa with as few practices that teams have? We missed so many. Brooks was a master. 1 month till the cruise. That's right.
Yeah. I hope so. There's ways that you can do it. You have to kind of do it in the most safe way so you don't get the friendly fire accidents that can happen sometimes in practice. You have guys getting, broken hands and, twisted ankles and knees and stuff. So yeah, the tackling was really hit and miss. I think there are better ways that you can coach it and teach it. And I just think this coaching staff slipped last year, just across the board. Interceptions were down. Forced fumbles and fumble recoveries were not as prevalent. The sacks, certainly for the edge rushers, they dropped big time. Tackling was very hit and miss. I just think that the Todd Bowles really needs to buckle down and just get his and his staff's act together and really come out and attack this preseason and training camp.
And it's also much tougher to tackle when a guy's in open space. So maybe if you don't allow the guy 5 yards of cushion to get open, then you don't have to worry about missing those tackles.
That's right.
I've always been an advocate as well, and this isn't even a Bucs thing; it's just across the league. Gang tackling and wrapping up when you freaking tackle. Everybody today just puts their shoulder into the player, and sometimes they stay up. Like a guy like Saquon Barkley is not going to go down from just a shoulder tackle, and they get an extra 15 yards. But it's fundamentals, and nobody wants to do it because everyone's a big shot now.
Yep.
It annoys the crap out of me, but there's not really much I can do about it. So
I would say Levante David and Antoine Winfield Jr. Those are the best two tacklers on the defense. I think most consistent tacklers. Diaby's actually a pretty good tackler too, especially in the run game. He's when he gets you, he usually gets you down.
Just wrap up. Wrap up. It'll make all the difference. Redfish with another super chat, this one of $1.99. Thank you very much. Says, do we know that Grizzard will use the same terminology?
Yeah, I believe so.
I would think so. I mean, he's coming from the same offense. Like maybe a thing or two here will be different, or maybe something he installs is different than what Liam Cohen has that will bring new terminology. But it would be kind of odd if he just came in and was like, all right, what we used to call this, not the case anymore. Like that would just be kind of confusing. So
speaking of Josh Grizzard, I reached out to the Buccaneers. We might be getting him for a press conference this week. I'm still waiting to see if that's tomorrow. Then we'll probably have a podcast dedicated to what Grizzard had to say. If it's Wednesday, which we're kind of thinking it might be, then that might be the Wednesday podcast. But just a couple of programming notes. Tomorrow's show at 4:00 Eastern, right here on Pewter Report TV. 5 big Bucs who may not be back in 2025. And we're kind of holding that window open for Wednesday. The Thursday show, we already know, is Unsung Bucs in 2024. These were a couple of topics we wanted to get to a couple weeks ago, but all of the Liam Cohen and Josh Grizzard news kind of took center stage, obviously. Then we were in the Senior Bowl last week. So those are the shows for for Tuesday and Thursday. And we'll have another topic on Wednesday if Josh Grizzard doesn't have a press conference this week, but kind of think it might be Wednesday.
Bucs Baseman with a $5 super chat. Thank you. Says, I honestly prefer Hendrickson over Garrett. I target him over Garrett. Also, I'm sorry, but Bowles is 61. You can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah, I mean, I like Hendrickson. I think he brings the speed off the edge, and he's a Florida guy, born in Orlando, went to FAU. He sure would love to come back to the Sunshine State. That would probably energize him being on this team. And I would like him just because it would cost less. He's a fiery guy, really good leader. Again, if this team goes out and gets Myles Garrett, I will not be complaining one iota, but just
right.
2 different price points in terms of trade value and what it's going to cost to get them. So,
yeah, I mean, as incredible as Myles Garrett is, and I'm really not trying to downplay that, he's worth every single draft pick that is going to take to trade for him. There's no doubt about it. But if you're telling me, Myles Garrett aside, if you're telling me that you could trade just a single second-round pick for a guy that has had 17 sacks in the last 2 seasons, and like you said earlier, not combined, 17 sacks in the last 2 seasons, that's right up there with the JPP deal. There's no question about it. It is right up there. So when you look at that type of production from a defense that was just as bad as how bad the Cleveland Browns were as a whole team, with Hendrickson in the Bengals, it's really tough to argue against that.
And you spend your first round pick on a cornerback, right?
Yeah. Bada bing, bada boom. Defense is done.
There you go.
Not really, but taking a step in the right direction.
Right.
Brad Sylvain, thank you for the $9.99. Says, can you see Bowles moving Tyke Smith to safety and having Izien back in as the nickel corner? Both those guys play hard and would love to see Tyke on the field more.
I could see that. I mean, Todd Bowles is a big Christian Izien fan. He really is. And he's an even bigger Tyke Smith fan because he's the turnover guy that was drafted to replace Christian Izien, who is solid but doesn't really get the turnovers like the way Tyke Smith does. 3 forced fumbles, 2 interceptions as a rookie. And this is missing, 4 games? So that could be a scenario that takes place. I wouldn't mind that. I think Izien did a solid job as a nickel defender. Having both those guys in the field is not the worst thing in the world. I still think that this team needs to add another safety to the mix. I just don't trust Jordan Whitehead. I didn't like what I saw when he was healthy. Now he's in a car wreck with broken vertebrae in his neck. You'd never know how that's going to pan out. Jason Pierre-Paul came back from broken vertebrae in his neck from a car accident. Didn't really seem to bother him. But he's also at the line of scrimmage, not as a safety, making high impact on the move collision tackles. Jason Pierre-Paul's, there's not as much force there because a lot of his stuff is happening, in close quarters. So we'll see.
Yeah, I've actually thought a lot about what's going to go on with Tyke Smith, and it's all good things for the Bucs because he had a very solid rookie year. But I'd be very intrigued to see him at his natural safety position. It's something that I'm happy to ask at the Combine this year, because if you recall, a couple of years ago, that's where Todd Bowles revealed that Antoine Winfield Jr. was moving into the slot the one season where they played him at nickel. So I'm curious if Todd Bowles is willing to reveal any plans that he has for Tyke Smith, specifically, if they want to keep him at nickel, if he'll eventually move back to safety. I like Izien at nickel, but I also don't think the Bucs should stop from improving either slot or regular safety just because Christian Izien is around. Yeah. I think he's going to be a guy that worst case scenario ends up on the practice squad. He's going to be fighting for one of those roster spots, but he's certainly not locked in or penciled in the way that Tyke is, that Antoine is, Zion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The big elephant in the room, as you just talked about, is Jordan Whitehead.
Yeah.
Because if it wasn't for the car accident, I'd be fine with giving Jordan Whitehead just another chance. Let's see how he does this year and in season 2 in his return to Tampa Bay. I think sometimes, again, other factors come into play, but the broken vertebrae, to me, changes completely everything.
Yeah.
Like, that's a very serious and a very scary injury, to the point where, like, right now, Jordan Whitehead's just got to worry about, like, his quality of life and getting healthy in that sense, let alone what's going on with football. For all we know, in a couple of months from now, the Bucs could either let go of Jordan Whitehead because he's not due any more guaranteed money.
Correct.
Jordan Whitehead could end up retiring because of the injury. So that brings in another big question and situation to this team on defense, which already has a lot of questions.
Yes. Well said. Totally agree.
Moving along, Richie P with a $20 super chat. Thank you, Richie.
Yeah.
Says, any thoughts of landing Myles Garrett? No one is giving us a shot. That said, you never know. Let's hope for a third emergency PR show this offseason.
Yeah. The emergency PR shows have hit really well. You guys have been fantastic audiences for those shows. We greatly appreciate it. Again, 11,000 from Friday's show alone at, what was it, 3:30, Matt, on a Friday? That was hella good.
Yeah, it was right
Grizzard.
before 4 o'clock. So
yeah, exactly. So we'd love to do an emergency podcast for an elite edge rusher trade, whether it's Myles Garrett, Trey Hendrickson, or, and maybe Jason Light says, you know what, I could pay, buku money for Garrett, for Hendrickson, or I could just save my draft picks and go sign Khalil Mack. So there's several options out there for the Buccaneers. In addition to the draft, it's a pretty good loaded draft class. But Myles Garrett, listen, he is an absolute stud. He is a game changer. He's a franchise changer. And we would love to be able to do an emergency podcast for one of those elite edge rushers, whether they come in free agency or via trade. We'll be doing it here at Pewter Report TV.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. Just needs to happen.
Yeah, just make it happen, Jason.
All over it. And Richie, I think you have a point about the Bucs maybe not getting the attention about being in the Myles Garrett sweepstakes. It's still very, very early.
Yeah.
And I don't think like even some of the big national names have necessarily been like, oh, these teams are like the top 3 targets. What I will say is, I don't know how many people expected the Bucs to get Tom Brady when he was available in free agency. Back in the day, and the Bucs did that. So never count out the Bucs. They can find ways to get the big fish as well. In this case, being Myles Garrett. Next up, Tyler Lavelle. Thank you, Tyler, for this $5 super chat. Says draft Landon Jackson and shape him.
I wasn't a huge Landon Jackson fan at the Senior Bowl. He's a big, angular guy. He's got some wingspan. I didn't see the pass rush plan. He didn't wow me in the one-on-ones. And that's typically a drill designed for the defense to kind of look good. I don't think he's got enough speed. He's to me, he's a poor man's Yaya Diaby. He's a power rusher who's got big, long arms and a good wingspan. But I think the Buccaneers need a complement. And that's why I was kind of making the case for Trey Hendrickson over the weekend in that Pewter Pulse, just because he's more of a speed guy. He's going to win with the quick get off, the first step, timing the snap count, very much like Shaq Barrett in his prime. That's how he won. I see Yaya Diaby as a Jason Pierre-Paul type, a very freaky, athletic, speed to power guy. But then Shaq Barrett is just that quick burst around the corner. And I think that's what they need. I think that's what they're missing, is that complementary style. And Landon Jackson, 6.5 sacks in each of the last 2 years at Arkansas. He's a quality edge rusher, but I think he's probably a 3rd or 4th round pick. And I think the Buccaneers should aim a little higher for another alpha elite edge rusher, whether it's a 1st round pick or trading for one of these guys we've talked about.
Yeah, they don't need 2 Yayas. So
right.
Meets McGee, thank you for the $5 super chat. Says, what do you think about the 6'6", 295 defensive end Jordan Birch? He's surprisingly athletic, but could he lose 15 pounds to play edge?
I think he's more of a 4-3 defensive end, kind of think Cam Jordan, right? Or really a defensive tackle. I think he could play defensive tackle in the NFL pretty easily. He's closer to 300 pounds than he is like 275, which is where he kind of would need to be to really gain some quickness in that first step. Again, I think the Buccaneers looking for some juice off the edge. That's kind of what I'm sensing. This team wants and needs is a guy with some burst. And it's not going to be Marquise Watts or Jose Ramirez. They're more like wave pass rushers. They're more of that backup type. I think they might be interested in a guy like Hassan Reddick, if not for the fact that after he was traded from Philly to New York, held out for the first 7 games of the season, then played the last 10, only had 1 sack after 4 years of double-digit sacks as a pass rusher. He's a smaller, fast guy, 6'1", 240. Hasn't done much against the Buccaneers, but I don't know. That's just my take on it. We'll see. Lots of time to talk about all these edge rushers. We know what's on the Buccaneers' radar for sure. One thing that needs to be on your radar is Briar Greaves Insurance. That's right. Unlike other insurance agents, Briar Greaves, they've got 90% of the auto carriers in Florida in terms of different insurers. They have access to those. So having an agent like Briar Greaves will ensure that you're getting the most comprehensive and competitive premium possible. No more wondering if you're just getting the best deal, because you will know what everyone else has to offer, including Geico now. That's right. Briar Greaves Insurance has become an exclusive Geico agent. Only a handful of agents in Florida can make that claim. And that's what I love about Briar Greaves Insurance. I'm a customer. I call John Greaves and say, John, what's the best insurance for my family? And he took all of my information, all of my family's information, and tracked it down. And it turns out Travelers is the best rate for me and my family with our crew. And that's the best part about it, is I don't have to make those calls. I have my insurance agent who can do that. But maybe you're someone who was interested in Geico. Well, Geico's got a great appetite for younger drivers. High school and college-age kids are some of the most expensive burdens on a parent's auto insurance plan. And Briar Greaves Insurance has been able to save families thousands of dollars on their insurance costs, and they can help you too. So what I want you to do is visit BriarGreavesInsurance.com today. That's Briar, B-R-I-E-R, Greaves, G-R-I-E-V-E-S, or call their office at 813-876-4166. That's 813-876-4166, and tell them that Pewter Report sent you.
You have a comment from Kieran Butt that says, any news on a potential new defensive line coach?
No. In today's PR mailbag, I threw out a couple of names. The Bucs mailbag, we had a couple guys that have been here before that might surface. Joe Cullen, one of my favorite position coaches of all time. I put him up there with Rod Marinelli in terms of coaching defensive line. He was here during the Lovie Smith years for 2 seasons and did a great job. He's going for a 3-peat with Kansas City. He is the Chiefs defensive line coach. So how could they get him out of that contract? Well, you make him a defensive coordinator in title only. Todd Bowles would call the plays, and then you could land Joe Cullen if that's an option. Brenson Buckner is another one who coached for 1 season in 2018. He coached with Todd Bowles in Arizona on that Bruce Arians staff out there. The only thing is when Todd Bowles went to the Jets after he left Arizona, he got reunited with Casey Rogers. They became fast friends and coaching buddies. And when Todd Bowles was recruited back to be on that Bruce Arians coaching staff by Bruce, Todd said, I'll come, but I want Casey Rogers. So instead of Brenson Buckner staying on from 2018 to 2019 and being the Bucs defensive line coach, they had to tell him goodbye. And he spent the last 2 years in Jacksonville, and they have a new defensive line coach there, Matt. So maybe Brenson Buckner, who did a great job here in Tampa in that 1 season. He's friendly with Todd Bowles, friendly with Jason Light. Maybe they go in that direction with one of those 2 former coaches that have coached Bucs D linemen before, or maybe they go in a different direction. But now that they've hired their offensive coordinator, they got a pass game coordinator, defensive line coach, seems like it's up next.
Yeah, I never think it's a bad idea to get a coach, one, that's familiar with the area, but 2, is having all this success winning Super Bowls with the Kansas City Chiefs the way that Joe
Yeah.
Cullen has. So maybe he comes in, if you, like you mentioned, promote him to defensive coordinator, maybe he at least bring some different ideas of like, hey, well, this, and this worked. I'm not saying that just because it worked with the Chiefs, it's going to work with the Bucs because it's different personnel and things of that nature. But it can't hurt to have bad ideas and to have better ideas and fresh ideas.
Well, Chris
and
Jones, George Karlaftis. I mean, those are some. Felix Anudike-Uzomah. He's got that defensive line for Steve Spagnuolo humming up there in Kansas City.
I mean, the Chiefs have been winning with their defense over the past 2 years. Mahomes is still the best quarterback in the league, but don't let that fool you. Like, the defense has done a lot. And Brenton Buckner, I just remember, like, 2018 was when I first, like, really got onto the beat, like, interning with Pewter Report. And the first big story I remember, it was, like, OTAs, and Brenton Buckner yelled at Gerald McCoy, and everybody was like, oh, my God, like, you yelled at a veteran and Gerald McCoy, like, the face of the team? And McCoy's like, yeah, he's a coach. Like, he's supposed to motivate me and stuff like that. So it's a guy that has fire and passion that maybe this defensive side kind of needs a little bit. So I think that could work out too.
Yep. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think either one of those guys would be outstanding hires. We'll see what Todd Bowles does. I would expect that position to, if it's not filled this week, they might be waiting until after the Super Bowl to make a run at Joe Cullen. We'll see. So if it's not filled this week, it might be an indicator that Joe Cullen will be on their radar. I don't know if that's the case or not, just my speculation, but I did write about those guys in today's Bucs mailbag because that's where the focus is now. Defensive line coach. It's a very important position. You got to make sure Vita Vea, Kalijah Kancey, Logan Hall, that entire unit is as productive as it was last year, especially if the outside linebackers, are not doing their part. They really need those defensive tackles to be the star of the show again. Speaking of star of the show, we got another show coming at you tomorrow, 4 o'clock. 5 big Bucs who may not be back in 2025. And we'll have a topic on Wednesday if it's not a press conference for Josh Grizzard. But on Thursday's show at 4 o'clock, Unsung Bucs in 2024. We'll put the exclamation point on the 2024 season and maybe peek ahead to some guys who might be some unsung heroes for Tampa Bay in 2025.
And in the meantime, as we wrap up this show, if you're not already doing so, please follow us on our social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram. We are at Pewter Report, and our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment on this video as well. As Shaggy says, hit that like button. So that's going to do it for us on this afternoon show. For Scott Reynolds, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.